Hi, this is Sabrina Oostburg, Division I athlete at Belmont University, and this is One-on-One with ADC Partners.
Hey there, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners, and thanks for checking out this latest episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. Really appreciate you being here. As always, a quick reminder, you can find past episodes of this award-winning podcast at adcpartners.com/podcast. If you've enjoyed listening to this show in the past, a rating or comment would be greatly appreciated. I guess it's sort of my way of flipping the screen toward you and asking for a tip. Well, at least it's cheap. If you're in this industry, you know that sports business is really dynamic. Change is happening all the time. New trends emerge, different technologies are adopted, audience tastes change on what seems like a minute-by-minute basis. Frankly, it can be a lot. And nowhere is this more true than in college sports, particularly in terms of name, image, likeness, or NIL. In the last couple of years, the ability of college athletes to make money promoting products and services has fundamentally, and to the consternation of some, irreversibly reshaped college sports. And everyone seems to have an opinion about it. And let's be clear, lots of those opinions are from people who aren't or never were college athletes. So let's change that up and hear from my guest, Sabrina Oostburg. Sabrina is currently enrolled at Belmont College in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a small school you probably never heard of. She competes in track and field throwing events like the hammer toss, an event you've most likely never seen. Yet somehow, Sabrina, competing in an esoteric sport for a little-known school, is an incredibly successful NIL athlete. She's currently managing a stable of over 20 NIL deals, many of which she pitched, negotiated, and developed herself. In our chat, we talk about her NIL journey and the advice she gives to other athletes wanting to replicate her success. She reveals what brands should consider to make their NIL campaigns more successful, her perspective on what makes an athlete creator different from an influencer, and what concerns her about the future of NIL. Actually, I'll even reveal the name of the YouTube video that forever changed her life. Hope you enjoy our chat, and thanks for listening. Okay, you were in high school an athlete, right? All right, so I think we've established that, right? But you were a field hockey and track athlete in San Diego, right? And now you're throwing the shot put and other heavy things, and you're weightlifting in college. It's a pretty big transition. I mean, how did that happen? And I'm curious about what some of the initial challenges you'd experienced when you made the transition from high school to college athletes. You're changing sports and everything. What was that like? I mean, it had to be an interesting challenge for you.
Yeah, it was really interesting because my freshman year of high school, I was a long distance runner. So I did the mile. That was my thing. My mom has a background in marathon running. So the first sport I ever did was a middle school long distance running.
Oh, they say that's just like shot putting.
Basically, just a little different. Just a little different kind of added to it. And so I started that in middle school, and then I broke my leg my 8th grade year in middle school. And so when I recovered, it took a whole year to recover from. I had a whole wheelchair.
You broke it good.
Yeah, I broke it by my growth plate, by the tibia, by the ankle. It was really bad.
Well, let's not talk about it.
Yes, and so when I recovered, it was spring, and spring is track season. And by this point, my mile was 30 minutes long, just to run it.
Yeah.
And then I just
realized, I don't know a lot about track. That's generally speaking not a great time.
But 30 minutes is probably not.
Probably not super competitive.
Not the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at my middle school, they had just started field hockey.
Okay.
I decided, well, if I can't run, I might as well do something else. So let's try field hockey.
No running in field hockey.
That's a little different.
It's a little different, right?
A little different. It's basically lacrosse, but on the ground with a little candy cane stick.
Yep.
And so we would run around, and I just thought it was really cool. So I did that into my high school year, and I did field hockey and track my high school year simultaneously because field hockey's in the fall,
Right.
then track's in the spring.
So you did get back to track even after the injury.
Right. So once
Yeah.
I started to recover, and yes, there is a little bit of running, and so that got me more into shape for track.
Yeah.
Then my sophomore year, I did field hockey, completed it, but then that spring was COVID for me.
Okay, right.
And we all have that common experience of the COVID.
COVID ruins everything.
Yeah, it happens. And then that same year, once COVID happened, my mom saw a YouTube video titled Top 10 Reasons Why I Moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Top.
Top 10 reasons.
Your mother's in some interesting internet rabbit holes.
Yes, she is. And she liked all 10 reasons so much we sold our house within a week, drove across the U.S., and now we live in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Cut it out. She just saw this video online and just said, the heck, we're moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee, so here we go.
Yeah, checked all the boxes. And if you ask us now, we don't remember any of the 10 reasons. We just know there were 10 really good reasons.
There were 10 reasons. It could have been like they have pretty rocks there, for all you know.
I mean, it is like an outdoorsy city, so they probably do.
That's a huge change, though.
Yeah, we saw that. We're like, yep, that's it. That's all it takes. Just that one video.
Okay.
We don't know anyone in Tennessee, so we don't have any friends, relatives. It's just purely a YouTube video.
That's a really good YouTube video.
For sure. And the funny thing about it, like, it looks like it was made with iMovie. It wasn't like a super high quality YouTube video. It was just really good.
Hey, I do all my videos on iMovie. What
Right?
are you saying?
No, I mean, that means it's really high quality, apparently.
Yeah, well, there you go. Clearly, it was convincing. All right, so you move across the country, and the next thing you know, you're looking at colleges in Tennessee.
No. So what
No.
happens next is now I'm a junior halfway through my high school year.
Okay.
I decide I need to make friends. I'm in this new state.
Yeah.
How am I going to make friends? I should join the track team. In Tennessee, field hockey is not a sport. It's
Right.
not really a high school sport. They have lacrosse. I guess I could do club, but that's not really something I wanted to do. So field hockey just ends for me in California.
Okay.
And then I joined track. I'm thinking in my head, okay, like I have this background in long distance running. But before I moved to California, I also started doing CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting.
Okay.
Also because of social media, I saw a documentary series on the CrossFit Games.
But the internet has played an outsized role in like how it has shaped your life. It's just fascinating. There you go. Generation
It
Z
really
right
has.
here.
It really has. To say it
Okay.
has no impact at all is such a lie for us. But I saw this documentary and it was so good, it just inspires you to get up and go work out.
Right. Okay.
That's how powerful this documentary was. And I thought to myself, if these people could do CrossFit, which is basically a mix of all the sports combined,
Right.
so can I. So I
Right.
started doing CrossFit, and it just so happens my best friend Sophia is a 3-time national Olympic weightlifter champion in San Diego. So I start working out with her, and where she works out is at most Olympic weightlifting clubs are in a CrossFit gym.
Okay.
And so she was working out right where I started CrossFit. So I thought, cool, I'll go CrossFit. And then in the afternoon, I'll go do some Olympic weightlifting.
All right.
And that was before I moved to Tennessee.
Okay. So you had already sort of been in the cut of the whole thing, and you get to Tennessee, and it's like, well, no field hockey. Time to shift gears.
Right, right. And so now I'm in Tennessee. I'm thinking, okay, I haven't been running for a year at this point. This is very important to know.
Yeah.
I go up to my coach. I tell him, hey, I'm going to be your best 1-miler you've ever had.
Mhm.
And he starts laughing at me. I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, no, you don't understand. You'd be a really good thrower. Throwing? What's throwing? Like, what
the
are you
hell is
talking
throwing?
about?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, you don't understand. I'm a runner, even though I
Yeah.
have not run for a year. He just laughs. He's like, okay, go ahead, go on a run with the cross country team. Go run 3 miles. I go on this run. I'm huffing and puffing. And by the end of the run, I officially retire from long distance running. I decided this is no longer for me. What was I thinking? It was a very humbling experience.
Oh yeah, tuck your lung back in experience.
It really was.
Right.
The next day I start throwing.
Yeah,
It
so
was
coach,
that
about that
humbling.
throwing.
Yeah, and then after my second day of throwing, 2 to 3 months later, I ended up becoming top 6 in the state of Tennessee for shot put.
Okay, so
And that's where you have that
sort of
transition.
this is sort of duck to water stuff. I mean, you really sort of coach took one look at you and said, this is your physicality. He recognized the strength that you had. He recognized probably things like wingspan and all the things that go into throwing. I would assume, right? I mean, that's what everybody's sort
Right.
of looking at, and you really found your moment, and then that's kind of what led you, I think, first to Austin P, and then
Yes.
ultimately to Belmont, where you are today, right? And you're currently competing in Division I track and field for Belmont University outside of Nashville, right?
Right, correct. Well, actually, Belmont's located in Nashville,
Oh,
so
it's in
it's
Nashville.
right in
Sorry,
downtown.
sorry.
Yeah.
I did not have should have looked at Google Maps before I did this.
Oh, no worries. If you know where Vanderbilt is, we're 5 minutes away from there because most people don't know where Belmont is. So I'm like,
They get stuck on Broadway and all the bars and all that kind of stuff, I would
oh,
imagine.
just ask me.
All right, so concurrent to all this, right? So, you make this big transition in sports, you find this success, and then at the time when this is happening, name, image, likeness starts coming up on everybody's radar, right? The Supreme Court allows, basically has a couple of decisions that allow this kind of opportunity to exist for athletes to use their name, image, likeness to generate revenue for themselves and other kinds of benefit. I'm wondering what your first experience as an athlete was with NIL. How did it get on your radar? And then how did your first partnership with a brand or company come together?
This is an interesting question because I had two first NIL experiences. I did NIL, but without realizing it before it happened
Yeah.
because of my experience in weightlifting, which is not an NCAA sport.
Oh, okay.
So
Right.
I had partnerships for weightlifting and I had that experience. And then I had my first in college NIL experience. So
Right.
I was very fortunate when I was in high school. I was very talented in Olympic weightlifting. I stopped CrossFit and was able to go to the Olympic state championships in Tennessee. But I needed money to go travel up to Murfreesboro, which is by Nashville. I live in
Yeah.
Chattanooga, it's 2 hours away. I reached out to this company called Nutrition Factory. Think of them like a GNC, a nutrition store. And I say, hey, like, I believe I'm going to get first place in this competition. I have the social media following at this point. And I convinced them that, hey, if you partner with me and you give me a certain amount of money to pay for my hotel, the entrance fee, and some food, I believe I could win. I could represent your brand. And
Mm-hmm.
they loved the idea. So
Okay.
they paid for me to go, paid for all that stuff. And then I wore their shirts and presented them. And they loved the content I made for them so much. I ended up becoming their social media manager for the rest of the summer
So
before leading up to college.
I have to ask what that first ask for you was like. When I said, I mean, like when you're going in and you're selling yourself and you're saying, hey, here's my opportunity, you're going to the brand, like here's what I'll do for you. Was that a hard thing for you to do? Is it just something that kind of came naturally? Did you think about it a lot? Or how did you prepare yourself for that particular moment?
It really came so naturally. The store was really close to my house. It just opened up recently, so they're still newer on the block. The brand itself was not new, so it was more like I don't remember the name of it, but you had like the store, like it's a well-known brand in
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, cool, but it's just the location was newer. And so I go up to them. I knew the owner, and so I was close with her. And I was just talking one day, and I had this idea, and I was just like, why not? So I pitched the idea. It was still fresh off my head, so it wasn't really refined. And so we kind of talked out this idea, and I'm like, cool, like let's write this out on an email, talk about what this would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And because they saw my social media, they assumed that it would really get their store some good exposure. And so it all just came out with this natural progression of leading towards that.
Can you talk about your social media? Like clearly you're successful at it, right? Because the supplement company that sponsored you to go, that saw what you were doing and saw the content that you were creating. What do you believe is your secret to success there? What's your secret sauce when you're thinking about creating content? And more importantly, where does authenticity fit into that? Like how do you showcase yourself effectively? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the most the most effective thing that I do is that I understand my audience.
Okay.
My audience, when I first started my Instagram account, I created it as a fitness account to showcase my CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting. I also dabbled in Spartan racing. And
Okay.
so I used this to connect all those people together and showcase, I'm like, okay, this is my journey, but now how can I make my journey more relatable to people
Mm-hmm.
so that it inspires them to work out? That was my original goal, to inspire people to
All right.
work
Don't
out.
just watch me, maybe join me.
Right. And so if people follow me expecting to see fitness content, people in my high school knew me as like the healthy fitness girl. I'm not going to go and partner with McDonald's.
Generally
That
speaking, no.
does not make any sense.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And so they would kind of lose that trust with me. It's like, hey, why are you promoting McDonald's if like you're the fitness girl? That
Yeah,
doesn't, even though, I love some good fast food, but doesn't mean I need to promote it on the fitness account. It just
yeah,
isn't, it doesn't align with the values of my account and who
yeah.
I am as a fitness creator.
Right.
And so that's where authenticity comes in, because if you don't understand your audience and understand what you're bringing to them, it kind of makes them rebel and just pivot a bit towards away from your account so that they lose that trust and ultimately they might unfollow you.
I feel like particularly consumers who are using social media, which is just about everybody now, can sniff out falsity probably
Mm-hmm.
better than at any point in their life. So if somebody is like, to your point, if you're a fitness instructor and you're taking money from McDonald's, it kind of like the house of cards kind of collapses in on itself, right? There's just no reason to do it. But to your point, if you're seeking out relationships with products and services that really fit with what you're putting out there, that's where the benefit of magic really starts to happen. Have you said no to companies that you felt were outside your brand, your own personal brand?
I have before. I've had certain companies I have mentioned that were like outside that fitness realm where they want me to promote like weight loss pills
Oh yeah.
or things like that. I'm like, I'm not about that. I'm more the natural way. I don't
Hmm.
think you need to do that, especially since I have a younger audience. I'm not going to tell them, hey, take this weight loss pill. They
Right.
don't need that. That's
Right.
not the way to go.
You're-
It doesn't make any sense.
I'm 18 years old. It's time to take a weight loss pill. Yeah, and
Right. It's
probably
like, oh,
getting a little
Sabrina tells me to take a weight loss pill. Like,
bit.
I
Yeah.
don't want that to be my what I'm telling people to do and what they remember me as. It just doesn't make sense for my legacy that I'm trying to leave on social media.
I'm sorry, but I'm assuming it can be really hard for people, right? I mean, they're, and I guess this is the question I want to follow up on is there's pressure, I think, amongst athletes now to create those deals. I'm assuming there's other people around the world who see you and see the success you're having with NL, and they start to think, okay, well, I need to generate that revenue. I want to create those deals, and they feel the pressure to maybe take anything they can grab. Have you heard that from your teammates? Do they feel like this is something they need to be doing, or is it still like, oh, whatever, I really don't want to just focus on the sport?
NIL, how people see it, it's really different for every single person.
Yeah,
There's people who see it and they're like, oh, I don't have time for that.
all right,
There's people who are interested, but they don't know how to get into the space.
right,
There's people who are trying to get into the space are not approaching it from the right angle, so they end up doing what you just mentioned, where they take every deal possible.
right.
And that's where doing ambassadorships come in, or just taking free product in exchange for posts, where all these companies are really just lowballing you
Yeah,
and not understanding like, hey, we're still in this new era of NIL where the deals I do are going to affect how athletes later negotiate with these companies. Because now, if I do a deal with a company and they just say, hey, we'll just give you an ambassadorship, so you get this 15% off code for your
right,
customers,
yeah,
every other athlete that comes to the company after me is going to be getting the same thing.
right.
So, unless I pave the way for these other athletes, they're just going to keep getting lowballed because they don't know any different.
Right. There's an inexperience to it, and you have the benefit now of having. It's interesting. Like you talked about, like you got the opportunity to be able to look at this from outside college sports. So you were free of the restrictions and regulations associated with. So you got to create a test bed for yourself as an athlete creating relationships with products and brands. And you've been pursuing deals for a few years now. I mean, you started working with an agency. You talk about athletes sometimes struggling to figure out how they want to get involved with NIL, start taking advantage of these opportunities. What advice do you have for them, for these folks who are looking to replicate your success?
The number one thing I have to say is that you really have to go and get a basic knowledge of everything.
Yeah.
And when I say everything, how to negotiate,
Mm,
how to create a brand for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing because in the end, you are a brand. And
right.
that's what you're pitching to companies. Hey, like, why I should work with you, all that. And then just doing all the dirty work. You need to learn about all the different components. That's what I had to do. When NIL came out in 2021, I went to modern day Google, TikTok. and I searched up, how do I get a brand deal?
Yeah.
Nothing came up.
Right.
And so I had to decide, is this something I want to pursue and figure out on my own? Or do I just want to not do it?
Right.
And so that's where I would suggest talking to people who are already doing it. And sometimes like you'll talk to athletes who do gatekeep, and we're still in that early stages where people are really helpful to others. We want to expand this space. We want to see other athletes strive and just expand and grow. And so most of the time, lots of athletes will tell you, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is what I suggest you doing. Hey, go talk to this person. They would love to work with you, point you in the right direction, or at least get you in the right mindset. Another thing is just creating content that's brand friendly.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I learned. So creating content series where you promote something. I just started this new series where it's called Hammer Time, where I'm hammer throwing different items. And so that way I can incorporate different brands. Hey, I'm throwing a Kleenex box. Hey, I'm throwing a Gatorade. I'm throwing all these different things. And that way it's easier to incorporate brands.
I have a question related to Hammer Time later, but we'll get to that at another point. Do you feel like NIL has fundamentally changed what it means to be a college athlete? Is everybody now sort of in this pool, or do you feel it's really more self-selective? The folks who want to do it, and the folks who don't want to do it choose not to.
I think it adds another component to college sports, is what it does. It's an
Yeah,
added bonus because
right,
now you have people that are transferring to other schools just so that they could get that add-on check.
right.
They're transferring all this stuff. They're going to these certain schools. So high schoolers going to college are selecting specific schools just for NIL deals. So it does change the trajectory of like where you go to school and where you decide in that aspect.
Hmm.
But you still have this huge amount of athletes that don't really care about it as much. It sounds nice in their head because they're just thinking, oh, this is a way I make money.
Right,
But
money's
they
gonna
don't
fall
really
into my
understand.
pockets, right?
Right. They don't really understand what that means and how to keep that sustainable.
Because it's work.
Right. Because it's
Yeah,
work. And the three different groups that are doing well in NIL right now are big division like schools. So like Big Five schools, these huge
high
schools,
profile
because
schools.
they have the money to do it. This is where all the people are watching. So
Right.
SEC, all these big schools.
Hmm.
Two, schools with collectives.
Hmm.
This is a third party group where you have this huge pool of money pulled together and they're giving athlete deals. They're
Yeah.
providing those deals for them.
Hmm.
Third, the athletes already have a huge social media following. Because they have this pre-existing following, it's easier for them to go to a company and say, hey, I have X amount of followers, this amount of engagement, you should work with me. Versus an athlete that has only 1,000 followers.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
these are the leaders in the space right now. So if you're not in that space, how do you excel in that space? I have none of those three.
Yeah.
So how did I do well in this space where I said these are the big people?
Took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, you're at a smaller school in a smaller conference. You are participating in, I think, what could be widely called a niche sport. Where does that success come from? I know there's people looking at like, "Oh, gosh, she's having so much success, and but she doesn't have any of the benefits associated with those three categories that you just brought up. Is it consistency? Is it creativity? Is it a mix of all of the above? I mean, how does that play out in your mind?
It really is a mix of all that added on with just pure grit and
Mm,
determination to
okay.
figure it out.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, there's no way to figure out how to do an NIL deal, so I'm really paving my own way.
Hmm.
I'm out here on LinkedIn. How many athletes are on LinkedIn? I'm connecting with the decision makers.
Yeah.
I'm meeting CEOs. I'm meeting their social media people. I'm also a sports administration major, so part of me has that natural gravitation towards networking.
Right.
So I'm meeting these people who are in the right places where I know we could have this ideal partnership. And so I'm already thinking ahead where all these other athletes aren't thinking this business mindset the same way as I am. And so figuring out how to do that, really growing my brand, having that background experience with the social media really has helped. And so throughout the years, I've learned, okay, this is how to read my analytics. This is how I can improve it. This is how I can make a viral video and how to utilize trends. So understanding that background information mixed with the business aspects of like just how I think, that's really how I've been able to like go this route.
It's interesting too, right? Because we're talking about a lot of positives associated with NIL for you, right? Because it's, I mean, it's, yes, of course, it's money in your pocket and things like that. But the promotion of soft skills, right? How to evaluate a contract, how to negotiate, how to go out and sell, and all those kinds of things are going to serve you well far beyond any time that you've ever played college athletics. But I'm wondering, like, if you perceive negatives associated with being an active participant in NIL. Does it bring pressures that you have to be concerned about? Does it really impact time management, things like that? Where do you feel like are some of the things that you feel like you personally have to be aware of, and maybe even some of your peers who are doing this as well?
The top two things I would say that are the negatives of NIL is number one, burnout,
Mm,
and number two, perspective.
mm,
Burnout. You have only so many hours in a day. You have to wake up, do some homework, go to classes, go to practice, maybe do some more homework, have probably 30 minutes of a social life.
right.
And then at the same time, you have social media, which is kind of your part-time job. Create the content, think of it, have all these different ideas, also negotiate with brands, keep up with them, follow up with them, and also look for all these new avenues.
Not to mention doing these dang podcasts.
Exactly. And so with that, you have to learn how to allocate your time wisely.
Yeah.
And when you don't, it just becomes stressful. Because for me, sometimes I'll be like, okay, I want to do this, this, and this. And when I'm going to bed at night, I'm thinking, what did I not get done?
Yeah.
And it frustrates me sometimes because
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I only have a time limit. You only have 4 years in college to make the most out of it.
Yeah.
And so if you're not utilizing that, it kind of makes you think, okay, how do I use my time wisely and effectively?
Yeah.
Then that goes on to number two, which is perspective.
Yeah.
Social media is still in that sense where if you're an influencer, you're making content in public, people kind of make fun of you for a bit.
Okay.
At my last school, people would make fun of me for creating content.
Right.
I have friends at other schools where they'll be like, oh, like, why are you filming? Oh, here's another TikTok. Here's the
Yeah.
social media stuff. And some people just think it's kind of annoying.
Right.
So you have that perspective of how other people perceive you. They're
Right.
like, oh, like, well, why do you always have to film this? And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm making money from this. This is
Right.
how I'm sustaining myself. This is what's going to help me for the future. But not everyone sees it that way. And they think social media is a joke.
I want to talk a little bit too about a couple of the things I think that are circle around this whole NIL discussion and athletes too. And I want to start particularly with the idea of the difference between NIL for female athletes and male athletes. What's your perspective on that? Are the requirements for female athletes who are active in NIL, are they substantially different from male athletes, or are there unique pressures that you feel like are faced, or is it really just everybody's doing the same thing and it all kind of rolls out that way?
I mean, NIL is different for everyone, but in
Mm,
terms of how companies choose athletes they want to pair with, the goal of NIL is to promote for companies to promote their products.
mm-hmm.
So they want people that are going to be able to push their products.
Right.
The difference between guys and girls in promoting that is that usually guys are playing these sports like football, basketball, and they have more eyes on them. So
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
great. They're on TV
Yeah.
more,
Just the traditional
people are more
media.
watching them. Like just because of that, that's different
Mm-hmm.
versus sports like gymnastics, basketball, which basketball for women's sports has been growing tremendously, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But then we're doing sports like for me, I'm doing track and field. I've just learned the other day that even though we are on TV sometimes, I'm doing a sport like throwing. We weren't even featured on
Yeah.
TV.
Right.
You had
Yeah.
all the running events, the
Sure.
pole vault, everything else except throwing.
Yeah.
So my parents were paying for ESPN and they couldn't see me on TV.
Right.
So you have this difference in who's watching who.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. And because more people's eyes are on guys' sports, it's different for female athletes because then you're trying to get that attention as well. There is also a benefit to working with women in sports because, as you mentioned, they do have to be more cautious with their social media. Like, okay, I need to make sure I have higher engagement. They have to work through other ways that other sports lack. So while you could have a football player with, let's say, 500K followers, they may have low engagement.
Right.
So making sure their engagement's higher to
Right.
compensate for that.
So you just have to be a bit more granular in your approach. You can't rely, as it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, smaller school, smaller conference, niche sport. It forces you to be more proactive, more active, more thoughtful on the content that you're producing and how the brand's associated with it. And as someone who has had over, I think you have something over 20 NIL deals at this point or something like that. You've got
Right.
a lot of deals, right? So you've got more experience than in this than the average bear. So I'm wondering what advice you have for brands who are thinking about getting involved in NIL and taking advantage of relationships with college athletes.
Talking to my agent, they're telling me like, okay, these are things to keep in mind that way, like when we're pitching you.
Okay.
High engagement, as I
Right.
just mentioned.
Yeah.
I've learned over the course of my years of doing NIL that it doesn't matter how many followers you have or what the like count is like. It's about your engagement.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are just talking on your content, commenting, resharing it? How much are they engaged in actually digesting it?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, as I mentioned before, is it brand friendly?
Yeah.
So how does a brand see themselves on your page? They're thinking that how can they incorporate themselves with you? And so when brands are trying to work with you, it's like you have to keep that in mind.
What changes do you think you'd like to see on how schools administer NIL? Is this something that you're feeling like, you know what, hands off, this is my gig, don't need your help, stay away? Or is it something like, is there a role that universities can play to support you and your peers in your efforts to generate income from NIL and those kinds of things?
I think colleges need to do a better job of education.
Mm,
The biggest thing in NIL right now is the lack of education.
yeah.
So I'm over here talking to companies I would potentially work with. They don't even know what NIL is.
Okay.
And so you have these college athletes going to these companies and possibly talking to them, but they have no idea what they're talking about because they just think they're another influencer.
Okay.
There's a difference between athlete creators and influencers. Athlete creators have that local tie to their community where they have that reach that influencers don't because they have the eyes on them from their sport. And so trying to express that to companies and making sure athletes are aware of that. Along with that, of course, athletes have trainings with, we have to make sure we know what the NIL rules, compliance, talking about all that. But I have so many people that talk to me like, hey, how do I get started? And it's hard because no one tells them how. And so making sure universities provide those things, just simple things like how to read a contract. I had to learn how to read a contract on my own that no one taught me and that my university did not provide. So I wish there was a program where you could team up with the law students. You know, we have Belmont Law School connected onto campus where they could at least read your contracts or at least teach you what to watch out for.
Yeah, where the red flags are.
Yeah, so there are athletes signing contracts where they think it's a good idea, but they're not sure because no one taught them or they don't know what to look out for. Because athletes are learning how to wear multiple hats at one time, but they don't know the red flags, as you mentioned. So giving them tools like contract negotiation, or at least how to send a professional email. That way they could present the best self possible to these companies. And that way they don't just shove them off because, oh, they're unprofessional. Teach them those life skills.
Yeah.
The other part of NIL that people don't talk about is that it teaches you career skills. I learned how to do email signatures. I didn't know what that was, so I started doing NIL. Learned how to do a professional email, how to sound, oh, like I'm businesswoman like.
Yeah, yeah.
I would not have thought of that stuff until I'm actually
Sup,
doing
bruh?
it. Yeah. You're like, hey, what's up? Like, no, try to like learn that difference into it. And it's funny to talk about, but it's like it's such a reality where you have athletes DMing these companies, hey, can I get a deal?
Yeah.
That's very vague. First of all, it's like, what do you want them to say in response to that? No.
It's such a great point, right? You're giving them a reason to say no rather than a reason to say, well, tell me what this is all about, because the no is easy. People are busy. And if you're not approaching this from the standpoint of what value you can bring to those brands and how you propose to bring that value to the brands. The conversation kind of stops in its tracks right there, doesn't it?
Right. So just equipping the athletes with knowledge of what you bring to the table and how NIL really functions, that it's not just you making money, it's a two-way street. And lots of these partnerships are no longer one-stop deals where you just do one deal, that's it. They're more longer term down the track. And so making sure athletes are in that right mindset when they're approaching these companies, saying, hey, like part of that. The also part of that is knowing how much they're worth. As we talked about before with ambassadorship programs, lots of athletes just do a video for $50 or less. I used to do that in the beginning because I thought, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money.
I got $50. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, but then that turns into burnout really quickly because all of a sudden you're doing 5-6 deals for $50. You're like, oh, if this is all NIL is, do I really want to do it?
Yeah, you get stuck in a hamster wheel.
Right. And it's like, no, you're worth so much more than that because you provide so much value, but athletes don't realize what that value is.
Right.
And so teaching them that side of it as well.
College sports is probably in a period of tumult right now that has never been seen before in the history since college has started playing games, right? And NIL is the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, Dartmouth men's basketball just voted to unionize. You see NIL beginning to change. You have conferences breaking down and growing bigger. Talk to me a little bit, if you could, about, and I realize this is a bigger question than NIL, but I'm interested in your perspective as a college athlete. As you look at all the changes that are going on in college sports, does it excite you about the future of what it means to be a college athlete? Does it kind of raise some red flags for you about concerns? Where on balance do you see, as someone who's involved in this right now, who's living this life, what's your perspective on college sports right now and what's happening?
It's very unstable.
Yeah.
Every day you look at it's so hard to keep up with what's happening in NIL. Oh, so-and-so is getting a deal. Oh, okay, Congress is going to propose this about it. NCAA wants to do this. There's so much talk that it's very hard to understand. So you also have the other aspect of like, how do you get involved when you have this constantly changing landscape where it's hard to keep up with? And so when I look down the road of where NIL will go, it scares me a little bit because you're not sure if it could go either really good or really bad. Some companies are just ideas start off really well, then it has a malicious intent. So it makes me wonder, like, are athletes going to get exploited in the future where they just do all this easy work or hard work for just not a lot of pay? Mm-hmm. Is it going to change where it's going to be really strict? The rule passed recently where you had, if you're going to a school to go on a trip to like explore it, you can't have any of that. You can't, colleges are not able to decorate the hotels anymore. So they just passed that for a bit. They might just change it back. So NCAA is trying to regain all this control because at first they're like, oh no, like we're not doing NIL. Then all of a sudden they're all for NIL and they keep changing the rules. It's like, just make a rule so that we could just stand by it.
Just any kind of consistency.
It's confusing for everyone.
Right.
Yeah. And so we'll see where it goes. It's hard to see where it will be because you do have those decision makers, but also trying to give your voice out there as well.
Anybody who says they can tell you where it's headed is a lying fool. So they're just making it up because it is three-dimensional chess right now, and nobody can really see what the outcome of this entire college sports experience is going to be. I'm with Sabrina Oostburg. She's a Division I athlete at Belmont University. Sabrina, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. And I know you got a busy class schedule and everything like that, and I want to, you get practice and everything like that. But before I let you go, I hate to do this, but I got to put you in the lightning round.
Alrighty, let's do it.
All right, here we go. So these are questions you don't know what's coming. This is where your athletic preparation will come in handy. Let's start with the easiest one. Okay, which social media app are you spending the most time on right now?
Snapchat.
Oh, that was
not hard to decide. Snapchat.
That was about as quick as answers we've ever gotten in lightning round. That put the lightning in lightning round. You are a hammer thrower, right? As part of as a thrower. And we talked earlier about some of the things that you throw for your different brands. What's some of the weirdest things you've ever thrown?
Mainly attitude.
You threw your attitude right out of the gate, huh?
One time I threw my dog onto the couch.
Okay. So live animals, that absolutely fits. Yeah. You're a San Diegan originally. You're now going to college and living in Tennessee. What do you miss most about living on the coast?
The good Mexican food.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I live 15 minutes away from the border of Mexico. So we had some really authentic food. It was,
My son just moved to San Diego. What Mexican restaurant do you recommend the most?
there is this place called Lolitas.
All right.
It is absolutely incredible. We have this local food called carne asada fries.
All right.
Imagine a bed of French fries layered with sour cream, guacamole, carne asada, which is like thinly cut steak meat,
Okay.
marinated with lime or lemon.
Like you gotta stop. You gotta stop because I'm now like about to consume my own
Hey,
kidney.
you know what a real California burrito is?
Yeah, French fries, right?
No, all that wrapped in a flour tortilla.
All right, very good. That's the real deal right there. Okay, you're a member of Generation Z. Please define the meaning of the word "riz."
Oh, you don't know what that is?
For those of you who are just listening, the look of pity on her face is just so tragic.
But hey, it's really simple. It actually comes from the word charisma.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. They've got having a lot of riz, a lot of pull. All right, very good.
Yeah.
All right, last one. All right, because I got to get out of this before I'm so embarrassed right now. Like we talked about, you're a hammer thrower. How many times has someone come up to you and said, "It's hammer time"?
Honestly, none.
What?
Most people think I'm a sprinter, actually.
Well, Sabrina Oostburg, it has been hammer time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
So good to be here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at abcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.